What's up? It's the intro. It's rolling, right? It's rolling.
Here we go.
I don't know how to play guitar.
Is that a Johnny Cash song?
It's House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah.
I'm missing a string.
There is a house in Sin City.
Wow. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Corridor Podcast.
Was that our intro?
Yeah.
Was that our intro?
I'm missing a string and it sucks, but it's cool. It's the intro. We know you guys don't come here for the intros, but they do brighten up your day.
So
What's up, everyone?
Jake has recently had a baby.
That's right.
That's the big announcement.
A little girl named Claire. And that is why we were without his banjo tunes at the beginning of this podcast.
That's right. She was born just a few days ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Surprise, everyone. Jake just had his third baby.
Yeah, he's got 3 of them now.
Yeah,
What's
now
he
it
gonna
goes
do?
3, 2, 1 for the number of babies.
3, 2, 1, 0.
3, 2, 1, 0. It's a beautiful, perfect countdown.
I do wonder who the next person at Corridor to have a child will be.
Who knows?
Who
Well,
knows?
Probably someone who's married.
Not necessarily.
No one here has children out of wedlock in the studio. We have a very, it's in our mission statement.
We're a strict Catholic organization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably gonna be Dean, young father,
Young child beater Dean Fodder.
child. Oh shoot, maybe he shouldn't.
That's such an unfortunate nickname that we've given him. Sorry, Dean.
Well, it's only because he beats up Ness in all the Smash Brothers games,
Yeah.
aka Clint.
And I guess we'll talk a lot more about that in the next podcast.
Yeah,
about
the
Smash Bros.
Next podcast will be about our office culture and why Smash has become the dominant part of it. Don't worry, if you're not into Smash, it'll still be a good podcast because you're going to hear more about rivalries and fights and all that good stuff than you've ever thought possible. But that's not what we're talking about in this podcast.
What are we talking about today, Nico?
In this podcast, we're going to talk about something that we touched upon in a recent Visual Effects Artist React episode that I've really been wanting to talk about more. And it's the idea of visual effects that don't have impact versus visual effects that do have impact. And kind of the idea of, you know, a company spending all this time and money and manpower and talent on visual effects, but other things around that aren't necessarily executed to the same degree. You know, when you go and you watch a cool movie and there's a simple VFX shot and it hits you emotionally, why does that hit you so emotionally versus other times you go and you watch, say, like, you know, a giant superhero movie. And don't get me wrong, there's effect shots in superhero movies that are mind-blowing also, but there'll be crazy shots that just kind of fly by and you don't feel anything. And it feels like, you know, you have 500 amazing artists working on one shot and like 3 artists working on another shot, and somehow the other shot with just a couple artists can be better. Now, that's not always the case, but
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about this strange disconnect that you see in films, especially these days, between, you know, visual effects and spectacle versus like something actually gripping you emotionally, and why that happens and how it can be, you know, addressed and all that. Yeah.
I mean, who has the answers to that one?
Well, like, I mean, separate from the story side of things, just when you have an entire movie that's visual effects, basically any Marvel film in the last 10 years, it's, you know, it's just an onslaught of just constant VFX shots. It's like we're getting to a point where there's parity between the number of shots in a movie and the number of visual effects shots in that
Yeah.
same movie. It's
Marvel
like
films are practically animated
practically the
films.
same, right? Yeah, practically animated.
Well, but that's great because it comes full circle and it's not visual effects based anymore in a weird way, where it's just like,
Yeah.
here's the story and we need visual effects to tell it, and it's not like a thing that's impressing anyone anymore.
But
you know?
I touched on this in my TED Talk last year, a little bit about that, because it's like, you know, the monster flicks, the action films, or the destruction films, you know, like, what was it, 2012? Yeah, Battle LA.
Skyscraper.
Yeah, I mean,
That new one with The Rock, where like San Andreas or whatever, you know, like, on the surface, the movie is not hiding what it's trying to be. It's supposed to be like a popcorn action flick. Turn off your brain, quote unquote, and just enjoy the fun
Enjoy the
spectacle.
half-hour of Houdini simulations.
Yeah, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoy that sort
I'm
of
into
thing.
that too. It's
But
kind
I,
of like
I
it's,
prefer that in a non-story sense. Like, I'd prefer to watch just a VFX breakdown reel of San Andreas rather than actually watching San Andreas.
I guess
I would
so.
agree
I
with
mean,
you.
but like 2012 is awesome. You know, it's like those movies solve the problem that like superhero movies have, which is like, oh, we have to have it has to be a really big deal when this whole like city simulation explosion thing happens. And those movies are just like, no, that's That's like every scene. Every scene is just another insane.
Well,
event
2012
like
was
this.
directed by arguably the master of disaster films, Roland Emmerich,
Yeah,
the same man that brought you Independence Day.
Did he direct that or produce it?
I think he directed it.
Yeah,
I
he
don't know if
directed
produced
it.
But this reminds me of the one of the best definitions or analogies I've heard about the idea of diminishing returns.
Right.
And let's say you have 10 chocolate bars
Mhm.
and you have to eat all 10. Great. That sounds amazing, right? I get to eat candy bars because I have to? Fantastic. Well, the first one is delicious. The second one's also pretty good. The third one, you're like, okay, I'll finish this one. The fourth one, you're starting to be like, you know, I could take it or leave it, but you finish it. And then the fifth one, you're only halfway through all the candy bars you got to eat. But the fifth one, you're starting to be like, I'm kind of done. I don't want any more. Then the sixth one, you're just like vomiting.
Yeah, it's also like the saturation of like spectacle shots in movies kind of reminds me of like, imagine you're watching like a David Blaine magic special, right?
I love David Blaine.
Yeah, I love David Blaine too. He's amazing. He turns to the camera and he goes, "All right, watch this. I'm gonna give this
Watch
person a deck of
this."
cards. They're gonna take one card out of it. They're not gonna show me any of it. I'm just gonna tell them what card it is. It's gonna blow their minds." And he goes, "All right." And he sets it up and he works the mood and he hands them the deck and they're like, "No way, he's gonna pull this off. He's set up the craziest situation." And then the person takes out a card and he just goes, "It's the 5 of clubs." The person's like, "Oh my god, it is!" And they turn around and they're like, "Wow, that's crazy. How did you do that trick?" Now that's cool, right? That'd be a really cool
I
video.
honestly think there is nothing cooler than watching like proximity magic tricks.
Right.
Like,
Now imagine instead though, if the David Blaine magic special is him just going up to a person and be like, "Think of a card, 5 of clubs, think of a card, Jack of diamonds, think of a card, 10 of spades, think of a card, ace of hearts," and everyone's like, "Wow, that's it." It was just that over and over for like an hour. Because that's still magic and it's still a crazy effect, but it's like, "Whoa, okay there, pump the brakes, buddy." Like, cool, you're guessing cards and I don't know how you're doing it, but man, you're hitting me with a lot of card guesses all at the same time, and just there's no story and you're not pulling me into it. I feel like it's the same thing with visual effects, these days, at least in those big films, where it's just like, man, after the 800th explosion on screen, it's like, yeah, candy bars. Well, this all started because we were watching Tron for Visual Effects Artists React.
and depending on when this podcast goes up, that visual effects react episode may or may not already be online. Probably
Right.
not yet.
well, it's close to it. If it's not out yet, it's coming very quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did a whole episode talking about the original Tron in 1982 compared to the most recent Tron, which came out in 2010. Basically a complete 30-year gap between the two movies and a lot of technical achievements that happened in between.
Yeah. And one of the things that we're looking at was, there's a couple of shots in the original Tron that are very basic shots, but they have a lot of impact. I mean, they're not all necessarily that basic, but they're very focused. And when they pop onto the screen, you're like, wow, that's really cool. And there's the later Tron, which don't get me wrong, does have some cool shots, but there's a lot of shots that are like mind-blowing technical achievements, but they don't hit the same way as the shots in the first Tron. And the question is, why is that? Why don't they hit the same way?
So I wonder if maybe they kind of do, but then they just never let up. So it's like the first time you go into the Tron world, especially if you've been watching the movie and not just like, skipping through it for a VFX Artist React episode. So you're like in the world, you just spent the last, 15, 20 minutes in the real life and all the political company stuff that whatever happens in that movie, right? And then all of a sudden, bam, cool neon lights all around the world. And you're like, whoa. But then the movie has to maintain that world, though. They
Yeah.
can't just be like, "Hey, visual effects shot. That was cool, right? Well, now that's all you get."
I mean, it happens
We're just
once.
in a room.
It happens once in the film, and it's in the very beginning. And it's like, yeah, there's plot, exposition. He gets zapped into the movie, and then regardless of how good the movie is, really, you know what I mean? How good the exposition and the story is, that first moment when those like little inquisitors or whatever they're called, excavators,
Steel Inquisitors.
It's something recognizers.
recognizers,
Yeah.
those the little blocky staple spaceships.
The staples, the flying staples.
When he gets picked up on that and flies into the city, that's awesome, and it comes down to like regardless of how much you're into the story, that one works because that's why you turn the movie on. You wanted to see that moment. We're in real life, and now whoa, we're in this crazy new universe, and so that's satisfying on all levels, no matter who you are, because you've made it this far in the film. That's the shot you've came here to see, So
What about them light cycles?
well, but that's the thing. that's also where it ends too. You know what I mean? Like, now we're here. Yay, the big reveal. It's over. And now something else has to drive this film other than look at this new cool reveal of this next area or thing or whatever, because we're there, you know? There's no, it's like Disney World. Wow, Disney World. It's like 15 minutes of exposition. We're going to Disney World. We got our tickets. You take time off school, kids? Yes, we did. Oh, here we go. We're on the plane. We're coming here. Disney World. Yeah. It's like, boom. And it's like, well, now what happens? Now you're going to just constantly show huge reveal shots of Disney World like for another like hour, you know? It's like there's something else has to happen.
I mean, I did really enjoy the light cycle sequence as a sequence within the movie, but I think the main problem with the movie is that the actual story and plot doesn't match that level of like world building and
which
fidelity.
happens all the time.
Yeah.
Avatar was my biggest disappointment in that regard.
I loved Avatar.
I'm not saying it's a bad movie. That's the thing.
Freddie said it best. He says a simple story told well is better than a complicated story that might be better but not told well.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not even about expectations or anything. It's just simply like setting up characters and stakes that you want to see happen or achieved or whatever, and they can be simple. I mean, I watched Avatar and I liked it. You know, it was cool. It was fun to watch. I wasn't like, this is a stupid movie, blah blah, fish people. You know,
but a lot of people did think it was a stupid movie. Niko, you just said that you were disappointed in it. Why was that?
Yeah, well, my disappointment came from the realm of, they developed this visual technology and all this rendering capability and all
Spent
these
years on it.
yeah, I spent years on it, to just, to give me the same kind of reheated storyline. And, it feels like the story and the time that went into the script, it feels like one or two people, maybe 3 or 4, sat down for a couple months and wrote the script. And they had like 1,000 people sit down for 5 years and do the visual effects. And just the imbalance there is what disappoints me, because I end up seeing a film that is visually stunning with like visuals that are far beyond anything else that's ever been in theaters. But I've seen the story before. I've seen it a million times. There wasn't really anything inventive about it. And like, I get it that some people are like, they're cool with that.
I mean,
and that's what they
there
want.
is some inventive stuff in it, actually.
Yeah, there's like inventive moments.
Like there's inventive
sequences.
concepts, which are like this whole like body, like hosting, like the host body kind of concept.
Like an Avatar?
And like, yeah, like transferring your mind, and like fun scenes that play off of that, like where one person's trapped in stasis controlling a body that's elsewhere and they're like helpless and coming, it's like there's sci-fi concepts that we have quote unquote seen in other stories, but compared to like Avengers, which is like a big portal. you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
it's like, yeah,
a big portal.
I think the best example of what I feel like needs to happen in the industry is what happened with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. There's a story that is truly unique. There is no other Spider-Man story like that, unless it's been pulled from a comic book. But obviously, that's not what I'm referring to. Like, there's not another movie where it's like, oh yeah, that's this plot from Spider-Verse. Like, no, the Spider-Verse story is wholly unique to that movie, and then it is paired with visuals that are also wholly unique to that movie. And it feels like the amount of effort that went into conceiving the film equals the amount of effort that went into visually directing the film as well.
Well, sure. I mean, but I could also say Spider-Verse has been done before. It's like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
It's not really the same.
It's like kind of similar, where it's like there's a metaverse concept where you're drawing characters from different universes into your. It's like,
I don't know about that. Those are pretty like they're maybe roughly similar from like a vague distance if you squint your eyes. They're not nearly as similar as Avatar and Pocahontas.
Sure.
Or the other 10 films that follow the same plot line.
I know, but do you want 1,000 people to write a story? You know what I mean? Like, you want thousands of people and thousands of hours to make this collaborative document that kind of gets probably washed out and evened out by like too many voices.
But what I want is a story that has as much creativity and refinement and inventiveness and achievement as the visual effects do.
Like, name a movie that has all that inventiveness.
I just did Spider-Verse. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Well, it's just a kid who has self-esteem issues and his high school problems has different Spider-Men help him. You know what I mean?
Not exactly. Have you seen the movie?
Yeah.
That's kind of it.
It's basically
Kinda.
I'm Spider-Man. Also, they are also Spider-Man.
I mean, to me, I think, and this is a little bit of a departure.
I
from what
love the
we're talking
movie.
about.
I love
too.
it. But I'm just trying to get a little reductive to like play around here with this idea.
Well, I feel like generally any good sci-fi movie, in my opinion, needs to have a premise that creates a story that can only exist with that premise. Like if you're going to make a weird premise, like let's say you do The Matrix, right? The world is a simulation, and then you go in there and then you tell a romantic comedy that has nothing to do with the simulation. Then it's like, why does this exist as a sci-fi film? You know? And I feel like a lot of films end up falling into that, where they create these crazy worlds, and the story they go and they do doesn't need that world to exist. The story could exist without that world. And to me, that's just because they're kind of just writing by the numbers when they write the script. Whereas there's films like, you know, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse that cannot exist without the world of the Spider-Verse world, you know? Like the Avatar story can kind of exist without the Avatar world to some degree. It just needs to be, you know, one person visiting another group of people, and they're at different technology levels and so on and so forth, and you have a war because one side has the resources the other, you know, wants. But like, you know, to take this back to Tron, you know, you see his crazy visual effects, but the story is just like characters looking for his dad. It's just like the creativity on one level doesn't match up with the creativity on the other level. And to me, it's a little bit of a tragic thing about modern filmmaking is that kind of occurs in films. You have just these like massive human achievements combined with just by the numbers script writing. It happens with video games too, all the time.
How much of that do you think is because writing is way more difficult than most people realize? It's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
Like good writing is incredibly hard. Because it's hard to judge how good something is when it's like so implicitly judged. You know, it's like it's hard to tell the difference between like what is better between these two amazing scripts. It's like which one's better. It's hard to say. Whereas with visual effects, you know, it's a little easier to judge how good they are because it's like, is it realistic?
Mm-hmm.
Is it impactful? Like there's a bunch of explicit check boxes that you can check off when it comes to something like how something looks.
I totally agree. And I think a lot of people really do underestimate how hard writing is. I think the other thing that people underestimate also within the industry is to be a good writer, to be a truly, truly good writer, like accomplished, you can't just write. You need to shoot. You need to direct. You need to act. You need to have experienced filmmaking because films are not a written medium. They're a visual medium. And if as a writer you only exist in the written world, you won't write a good film because films need to have images paired. Like a good film can usually be told without words, you know? So a good writer should be able to write a movie without dialogue. But if you don't have an idea of how to visually tell a story, if you don't have an idea of how to pull these different units together, if you don't have an idea of how an actor puts a twist on a character, if basically you don't know how the system works, it's hard to write. And a lot of times, you know, at least some starting writers don't necessarily have that full breadth of achievement of experience, which it's obviously it takes years and years and years to build up something like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a really subjective thing. Ultimately, I feel like I think just going back to this Tron example, like I think you can boil it down to just the fact that the story here is I think the South Park guys had the whole like, you know, butt kind of like writing rule where it's like the butt writing rule where you want to be stringing your events and moments together with the word but.
Like, are we talking one?
This happened, but then this happened.
Okay.
Versus this happened and then this happened. Because the word but basically implies, well, something unexpected is going to come up here.
Some sort of conflict. It's
Conflict.
kind of like an improv when you have like yes and, you know, you're always trying to add something to the scene. So
Right.
that's like another version of that, I guess, right?
Exactly, and it's not just about additive story here, where it's about like actual expectations and stuff like that. And you know, the Tron movie is, I think, the and version where from the onset of the piece, there is the first time you meet characters, they are clearly defined for the rest of the piece. You know, there's not like there's like a little backstabbing here and there, maybe, yeah, not really, but it's basically here's a bunch of clearly defined characters. We know exactly what they want and how they're going to act in all these situations, and then we just throw scenes into the pot, and everything is exactly how you expect it to go, and then it ends. And so you're not invested, you're not surprised, your expectations are not met, so on and so forth.
Well, once again, it's that time in the podcast where I tell you about today's episode sponsor, Storyblocks. Now, you may have noticed they keep sponsoring this podcast, and that's because they keep offering an awesome tool for content creators. Do you have an Instagram account? Do you post photos or videos on it? Do you have a YouTube channel? Are you an aspiring filmmaker? Are you a filmmaker already? Well, guess what? Storyblocks has something for everybody in those categories. They are the one-stop shop for all of your stock asset needs. They have B-roll, After Effects templates, sound effects, motion graphics, and more. It's all royalty free and it comes in high quality 4K. They also are constantly updating their site and their library with new footage and new assets. And the best part is, with an all access plan, you get unlimited downloads that can be used for any type of project. So whether it's a commercial or it's something for YouTube that you're monetizing or whatever it might be, you download it, you put it in your video, and you move on with your day. Whew, that's a lot of information, but if you guys are interested, head on over to storyblocks.com/corridorcast. If you've already been there and you've already signed up, well then, tell a friend. You better have learned a lesson here. I want you to know Storyblocks is the one-stop shop for all your stock asset needs. Storyblocks.com/corridorcast. Back to the podcast.
So in the example of Tron Legacy, what would be the difference between story and plot?
I mean, it's so hard to, and we're getting
Like, okay, well then,
it kind of gets into the weeds.
In general, what's like the biggest defining factor of a
plot.
story or plot?
Okay, so plot is, now we have to race these motorcycles. Now we have to throw frisbees. Now there's secret agents in our nightclub. Now there's this, it's like that's plot basically.
Okay.
Events.
These are like kind of
sequence of events.
Wikipedia entries.
Well, it's like, let's say I'm designing a D&D campaign where I'm like, all right, well, there's a motorcycle racetrack over here. If they wish to compete, they can sign up for that. We have another event over here. There's a frisbee game here. And there's also a nightclub here. And I have maybe a cool thing planned where, like, maybe the bad guys will attack them in this area. But they can go through the stuff in any order they want, whatever. But the story is what drives them to get there and what drives them to go to the next place. It's not just like, you guys want to race motorcycles? Sure. Let's race, okay? It's not like, it's like, we have to race these motorcycles or else blank, or
Yeah. We need to win the trophy because within that trophy is the key to
or I need
unlocking-
$1,000 to buy some new bones. And it just so happens that we'll win $1,000 by entering this light cycle competition.
$1,000 is enough to get you 10 sets of bones.
It's like, yeah, yeah, exactly. I know. As per the canon, I know I slipped up on that one. But it's, the story is the thing that goes beyond these events. The thing that pulls you into them and then through them and then on to the next thing. And, I think that's my definition anyways. It's like the guy who, he didn't teleport into the Tron universe to race light cycle bikes. He wasn't like, what's going to be sweet? Throwing frisbees and motorcycles. No, that wasn't it. Yet when those scenes come up, it feels kind of like,
so yeah,
why are we doing this again?
That makes sense to me. So its story is, everyone always says the story is the most important factor of a movie or any sort of story.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think that's just accentuated here because I feel like the story of Tron Legacy wasn't strong enough to justify the plot or the world or everything around
the majesty of the visuals.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I love the aesthetic of Tron Legacy. I thought it was super cool.
Yes, exactly. That's why I went to see it. I was like, I want to see what this whole
dude. Yeah, when that movie
thing's
first
about.
got like announced, or rather when the trailers were dropping, just leading up to the movie actually coming out, like everyone was so hyped. Daft Punk did the entire score. Everyone loved Daft Punk. This movie is gonna be amazing. And then everyone was kind of just like, eh.
Yeah. The scene
but it's like, it looks so good. How could you possibly have that reaction of eh?
I know, right?
Because it doesn't matter unless the story's good.
Exactly.
You gave me too many candy bars.
Too many candy bars. With, when we were reviewing the scene in the nightclub where there's like the ninja fight, every single time it cut to the Daft Punk guys like bobbing their heads up in the little window, it's like they could have replaced that with a billboard that said Pepsi. You know what I mean? And I would have felt the exact same way. Like, why are you cutting to this? Like, okay, I get it. They're here. Like, okay, it's like it felt like a brand, like a sponsorship of the film or something. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you're not like, cool, there they are. It's like,
I mean, kind of. That was the idea. Is like, cool,
But
there
it's
they
just
are.
like, it's just placed poorly.
it's just placement. It's
Without
it's,
intention.
It's basically product placement in a weird way, where it's completely irrelevant to anything that's happening.
Like if they would have maybe like been involved. Period.
Beyond just like,
like just that.
Like
sentence.
maybe a scene where they have to get a microchip from their DJ station or some crap, you know, or like,
yeah,
I mean,
turn up the music so that like some guy can't talk.
it was just
or-
like, no, these people are fighting for their lives, apparently, because one of them's trying to find their father, and you're cutting to Daft Punk bobbing their heads like nothing's happening.
also, don't forget, through the entirety of that sequence, everyone's like fighting and dying. That one dude,
There's a shot of a person crying and picking up the pieces of a loved one.
right.
See,
And,
that
then,
was
and then it cuts to Daft Punk going like, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on?
There was that dude who's just constantly dancing and laughing at everyone
yeah,
dying.
with the
I
cane.
forget what his deal is, like who this character is and why he's just so nonchalant about all that. But like,
Whatever.
I forget the dude's name. He's been in a lot of things, like Underworld. Anyway, he was just like, ah.
Yeah.
It felt weird.
Yeah, I think it's just that disconnect once again between like the artistry going to one aspect of the film was not matched by like the artistry going to the other aspect of the film. Like the effort that went into like how can we incorporate Daft Punk into this scene? Like that was a 1 minute decision. I'll just cut to them. You know,
I mean,
like,
how
that's
much
it.
of that is due to the director versus the writing?
Probably a bunch.
Well, and the producers most likely.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a relationship for sure. But like, I don't know, like after being through this stupid process so many times at this point, it's like if you have the forethought, if you have the time to really think about stuff before going onto a set like this, you can usually make that kind of stuff work or figure it out so it's placed in a way that makes sense.
Well, that's also assuming you have the freedom to then make the change. Because that's the thing is like you go onto that set and you're like, okay, we got Daft Punk today. How can we incorporate them? You know, it just in the script it just said insert Daft Punk. So it's like, okay, now we're on set and here's Daft Punk. How can I incorporate them? It's like, well, it'd be cool if I did this. Maybe I could do this. Okay, let's tweak these shots. Let's add this. We'll tweak the script. But you don't get any of that freedom in a film like this when things are that expensive.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's something, and this is obviously pure just speculation here. I'm making this up, but like, what if it was something along the lines of, all right, Daft Punk, it was in their agreement, their
Most
contract that like they just had a cameo, no much involvement in the movie. They would score the whole thing. They just had to be in the film for a little bit. And maybe they were just like, we don't want to do anything more than just kind of sit here and DJ.
Yeah,
Live
but
with
why not
it,
pick a
deal with
funnier
it.
scene or a better scene to do that than like a life or death situation?
I mean,
Because it'd probably be like out of place.
here's how I
I
would
mean,
do
how
it.
much funnier if they go to Jeff Bridges' house in the Cyberverse
In Daft
and,
Punk's
and,
bathroom.
and they're
That
just
would be
like playing
awesome.
beats in the background. They're like, "What's up, guys?" And that's it.
That'd be
And,
great.
like, great.
That's already better.
He's like, what a baller! He just has them trapped in a box, playing music from. It's like that's way funnier.
No, I actually agree with you
Yeah,
right
that
there.
would've been great.
That's a good solution.
Or, you know, if you gotta keep him in the nightclub scene, use him in the intro of the nightclub scene. You know, dude walks on the floor, everything's dark, boom, Daft Punk hits play, lights come on, people start dancing. It's like sick. It's a nightclub with Daft Punk. Okay, continue the scene. You know, that at least would incorporate them into the emotional flow
Yeah.
of the scene.
I guess
Yeah.
what I'm getting at is we have no idea what's going on dictating the terms behind the scenes.
Right, but I think it's
Yeah, who
just
knows?
regardless of that, it's it's no excuses filmmaking. At the end of the day, the product is the product.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree.
You know, I feel like there's another aspect of this too, like in terms of getting people to be impressed by your visuals, which is we experienced this with videos on Corridor. If we make something so polished or too polished, people critique it on a different level. Like we've had people say like your effects are better than Hollywood, which objectively is not true.
No, I always feel embarrassed when I see those comments like, oh, you guys are doing better than Hollywood. I'm like, I don't think you know what you're talking about.
But don't get me wrong though, there are effect shots in Hollywood movies that don't look as good as effect shots that we have done.
I would agree with that.
True. Yeah. You know, we've had CG blend better than, CG in Hollywood films, but from an overall standpoint, especially from a technical standpoint, the effects in Hollywood are better.
I mean, the VFX supervisor at Weta Digital, Matt Aitken, complimented us on our Bosstown video. He was like, that was an amazing video. You guys know what you're doing. The visual effects hold up.
Yeah.
All right, better.
This is the guy who oversaw Avengers.
Yeah, which is great. It's amazing. It's super flattering. Though the thing is, what's weird is when you step your polish down a little bit, it becomes a little more amateur, and you can kind of feel like, oh, it's a dude who made this.
Mhm.
Like that's when people say our effects are better than Hollywood. And then when we step our game up and we get really polished and we try to bring it to Hollywood level, that's when people go, it's not as good.
Well, give me an example of that.
I mean, one
Shadow
example.
of Mordor.
What's that?
Shadow of Mordor.
Shadow of Mordor, yeah, sure.
Well, I don't think it was the effects necessarily in that piece.
Or people pointing out like Clint's foot clipping on the robot in the first Boss Town Dynamics video.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's
I mean, there's always examples. Of
Sure, there's
how our
errors
effects
and
fall
stuff.
apart.
I think it's just really just the thing of like who are you competing with, so to speak, where it's like it's not just the effects itself, but it's like the concept of the whole production where
you invite that level of scrutiny when you
if you're
try to make it.
Yeah, if you're trying to go, this is real, you know, like that means if you're saying this is real, either it's a parody, well, not a parody, but it's like you're trying to literally fool someone into thinking it's real, like the Boss Town videos, which he successfully did. So we're great, blah blah blah. but the thing is, when it comes to like stuff that's truly narrative, not like
Yeah. Okay. That was what I was
here's a
gonna
video
say.
with jokes, haha, this is funny, the end. Like that's not it. It's like the Shadow of Mordor of the world, or the stuff where it's like, here's a new universe, believe it's real. We're gonna bring you on a little journey through this universe, and then something weird looking pops up that's not utterly convincing. It shakes the whole thing up, and you're out. And so it really depends on like where you are in that narrative ladder, from like parody or comedy to like something that's dramatic, that I think is what's truly dictating it.
So, like, what's an example of a serious short film that has a lot of visual effects that are meant to be like high grade, like this is supposed to be pretty good, versus Fart Attack?
Well, that one's clearly, it can be anything it wants to be, because
Well,
it's
that's
dudes
what I'm
farting
saying.
on the street, flying around. Like no one. I mean, the realism there is like less of a matter than just the concept, in a weird way.
Well,
I
that's
guess,
no. My
maybe.
point is, because of the nature of that video, we could have had way crappier effects in that film.
No pun
and
intended.
Oh my god. Whoa. But like they could have been worse, you know, and the video would have been just as good. Although part of the video is like, oh wow, look at those smoke simulations. That was kind of the point of the video, right?
The other half. I mean, sometimes the other half of this is sometimes things get funnier if you do put more work into them. Where it's like, here's a video about guys farting, and check this out. We're gonna take our computers here and set up some semi-advanced like smoke simulations that are gonna take hours and hours to simulate.
Or Vape God, yeah.
Or vape. You know, it's like there's something funny behind with like seeing a dumb concept like brought to a point of like excellence of in some way. You know, where you're like,
Which I'd say we excel at over
You know-
here at Corridor.
you know, what
That's
I'm
our,
saying?
that's our bread and butter, taking a
Yeah.
stupid concept and making it epic.
Yeah, exactly. But that's part of the comedy, which is seeing how over the top you can get.
But you do lose something when you make something so polished and so refined that you lose the concept of an artist being behind it. Like
Yeah.
when you can see like, oh, one person did this and this is really good. I could theoretically do it if I spent as much time learning how to use the program as that person did, versus this was made by literally 500 people and I have no concept of how this is made. It's cool looking, but like I can't feel the human.
I mean, but are you? What do you?
Inside of it.
Okay, so let's say, okay, give me a movie that's too polished.
Well, no, I think
A movie that's too
No, I think-
You're like, should Avatar have been like, or
No,
maybe
I
maybe
think-
Clue and Tron, the head should have
I
been
thought
at
he was
like
talking about
21
videos.
frames per second and skip frames every once in a while, or
I think more to the point is like, for example,
like the
this.
textures get low res when you get close to his
If I showed
face.
you a single frame from the Avengers, not from like the big epic final shot, but just any part of the movie that's just a technical achievement, but you know, it's like a shot of a spaceship, right? If I show you that one frame, and then you sat down and watched somebody take a pencil and draw a photoreal rendering of a person's head roughly in 20 minutes, you're going to have more of an emotional response to that 20-minute pencil drawing versus that frame that took literal months of man hours when you combine it together.
But are you just
My
well,
point being is that it's the hand.
if they
and the
drew
presence
every
of the
frame of the
artist.
Avengers, it'd take way longer.
Well, no, the point
no,
is,
you're being
it's the
obtuse.
human element.
Yeah.
It's the human factor here where you know it's one person produced this thing. That's why you have subreddits like Top Talent or whatever, you know, where it's like, it's so cool. This one person was able to do this thing. In theory, this person did this, so I could too.
Yeah.
So if one person
Versus-
made the Avengers,
Whereas like,
it would
oh,
be better.
10 people
It would
made
hit
this,
you
1,000 people made this. I couldn't
But
do
would
that
it-
because 1,000 people are required.
But
If one person made the Avengers, it would be so inspiring.
oh, of course
and
it
so
would,
captivating.
but also like just an anomaly
be
that
going-
would never happen again.
But you would say "Holy shit" every time like a new shot came on, which is kind of what happens when you watch any of Ian Hubert's stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of experienced a little bit of that back in 2013 when I came out with my Harry Potter short film. You know, it was like I spent half a year on that thing. It had over 100 VFX shots, smoke sims, and all that stuff. And it was like, it was a pretty polished short film. I feel like I've come a long way since then. But the point is that I think a lot of people knew it was basically just me who made that video. And so the whole time watching it, they're like, oh, wow, one person made this.
Yeah.
It kind of changes your interpretation of what you're seeing. You tend to be a lot more forgiving on mistakes and like visual things like, oh, yeah, it's a little amateur, but hey, it was just one person. So
Well, look,
look at all this other stuff they did.
Now,
Yeah.
but is that something that's just something that is more of an aspirational aspect to it? Because like obviously we make videos and do this kind of stuff. And so if I see someone, like I see one guy do something incredible, I see like Peter releases a funny like video, and I'm like, wow, I know one guy made all that, and that's impressive because I want to get better at making this kind of stuff too. It's like
I would say it's not just
it feels like an
aspirational.
aspirational element. Like, you know, viewers on YouTube want to make videos
The reason I say
too.
the reason I say it's not just aspirational is because you had the same effect when you watch Jackie Chan fight scenes. You're
Okay,
like, this
yeah.
is just a human operating at the top of their capability, and it's super entertaining watching this person do what they do best. Versus like if it was like many fight scenes now, if it was super polished, covered from 100 different angles, hyper edited, crazy sound design, it can be cool if there's other context around it. Like if it's creatively cool and it's executing something that's, you know, visually never been like directed before, you know, that's one thing. But if it's just a fight scene, it has zero impact. Versus like you go to that old school fight scene, you know, where it's
Well,
Jackie Chan doing something, and it has so much more impact.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not
It's
saying
the human touch. It's the touch of the artist.
I don't disagree with the concept of that statement, but what I do disagree is the fact that there's one thing that's better than the other, because they're like separate concepts. Like I watched Blade Runner, the new one. I saw it twice in theaters.
You saw it twice in theaters?
Yeah, because the first time I saw it, it was so amazing that when I heard
I just see it again.
more guys were going out to see it, Niko and like Mike and Jan were seeing it again, I was like, yeah, I want to see that movie again. And I watched it again. I was like, this is even better. Like
Oh, I just realized you said Blade Runner, not Blade.
Blade Runner. Like, but
It's like,
that
when
was
did we go see Blade in
that was
theaters?
made. There is no human touch on that film.
I disagree.
Oh
Blade
yeah.
Runner?
Yeah.
2049?
I mean, call it what you want, but I wouldn't describe it as the human, like the painterly touch. I didn't see the brush strokes.
I mean,
if
there's a little bit of the
there were
Roger
them.
Deakins touch.
Maybe it's Roger Deakins,
But actually,
who
you know
knows
what?
how to film stuff.
You know what?
in a-
I do agree
it's
with
great.
you.
It's great cinematography.
You don't see the hand of the artist in Blade Runner 2049, but that takes us back to the beginning of this, which is Blade Runner 2049 has creative saturation throughout. It's not a generic script with really good cinematography. It's not a boring movie with good visual effects. The whole thing is through and through creatively executed all the way down to every single detail. So
Yeah.
the
it's
crazy visual
beautiful.
effects are justified by also having a crazy story in a crazy world and crazy everything.
Yeah.
I mean, but another factor on top of that is the fact that like every shot looks amazing just from like a pure like artistical beauty standpoint as opposed to like a technical achievement.
Well, I mean, isn't
Yeah.
Tron like that or something?
Not
Yeah.
always. I mean,
Ish.
a little bit. But like that's the other thing is like with Blade Runner 2049, sometimes the shot's pretty just because they put the camera in the right spot. And it has nothing to do with how many people worked on it. It's just them going, yeah, lower the camera by 2 feet. It's a better angle. Oh, and maybe just haze that up a little bit. Perfect. And you're like, that's a beautiful shot. The composition is stunning. And all I did was pick a lens and pick a camera position.
Mhm.
You know, there's not 500 people working months and months and months to deliver that shot to you.
Again, we're coming back to my TED Talk. It was like, because that won the visual effects Oscar, was that movie. But the other big contender was War for the Planet of the Apes, the third Planet of the Apes movie, you know? And it's like, the effects in that movie, in my opinion, were far better. But it's just a bunch of monkeys walking around.
I guess, yeah. Maybe from a technical standpoint, there was more advanced things going on there. But the thing is, I mean, maybe it is just a cinematography thing at that rate, because it's like, it's not about the visual effects, but it's just like, you know, how do you capture it and convey it to an audience? You know?
Well, it comes down to the fact that it's like Blade Runner kind of just it engulfs you inside of its movie and its world so well that you just kind of forget that anytime you're seeing like the spaceship walking around, or like
Yeah.
the little hologram lady like phasing through him and whatnot, like you never really consider like, oh yeah, that's a visual effect. You're like, oh yeah, that hologram, man, that would be cool to have. As
Yeah.
opposed to like War for the Planet of the Apes, you're constantly looking at these apes acting. You're like, wow, that ape has some really good eye animation. That's cool.
Yeah. You know, it kind of like, there's an analogy that comes to mind. So I just saw the Ford versus Ferrari movie, and they bring up how like, well, at Ford, it's an assembly line. and every person has a job. One person tightens the bolts, the other person polishes the chrome, the other person airbrushes the fender. I'm just making these jobs up. I don't know how a car was made. But, it goes down the assembly line. Each person's just part of an assembly line. Whereas at Ferrari, one person makes the entire engine of a car. So it's like each person makes one car. So it's not, it's not a car passing through 100 different hands. It's one car in one hand until the car is basically finished. I'm simplifying a little bit, but it's, it kind of brings into mind this whole visual effects thing. Like these days, visual effects are basically a factory line where a single shot passes through the hands of hundreds of people.
Right.
Not hundreds, but
I
lots
see where
of
you're
people.
going with this. Yeah, absolutely.
But if you see another shot where it's just one craftsman, maybe with the help of a couple other, has made that one shot, it hits you differently. It feels like it's a work of art. The other one feels like a product.
I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with writing and why it's
Mhm.
just one person who writes something versus a committee.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think the other thing with writing too, though, is that like, especially these days, because making movies is a business decision. At least big movies are. So it's
mhm.
when a movie gets greenlit, like it wasn't like somebody went, you know what, God, I love Tron, and I just have this. I have this idea I've been working on for years of another story in Tron. I just need the opportunity. Like that's not how Tron started. Tron started with somebody going, what's an IP that I have
Yeah.
that I can revisit?
It's more like, it's about time we made another Tron movie. So,
Yeah.
any ideas?
I'm going to hire you and you to write Tron. Cool, thanks. I guess I'll just put a story together. And okay, shit, what do I need? 10 pages. I need like one of those scenes that gets me from here to here. I'll just open my book of movie scenes. I'll
What's it
use
gonna
that
be
scene and
about?
I'll change the names.
Yeah.
And so a guy delivers a script in a couple months and then they go off and they make the movie, It's the same thing happened with like, I don't know, there's lots of films where they write the script in like a couple months. I mean, the second Star Wars movie. Heck, all the Star Wars movies that recently came out are perfect examples of that.
I would disagree with that. Not all of them.
Well, not at least the Bane 3 that came out.
I would still disagree. One of them I think stands out.
I mean, are you talking about Ryan Johnson?
I am.
I mean, it's still like it could have been better. And the reason because that is like they bring Ryan Johnson on. It's like, okay, you got a couple months to bang this out. We shoot on this date.
He had a lot of time to work on it. The problem there was that he had a lot of oversight from Disney.
Right. Well, they
He had to,
also
like-
didn't have any plan for all three movies either.
That is true.
No one sat down and did the creative legwork before deciding they wanted to make a Star Wars movie. Star Wars wasn't created because someone said, I have these stories I need to tell. Star Wars was created because they go, we need some money to make.
Yeah, it's time to make some Star Wars.
Now we got to make some
No,
stories.
I do
Stories.
100% agree with you there, and that's what frustrated me so much about the entire trilogy is the fact that like the third movie just kind of like retconned a lot of the stuff in the second movie. Is like, oh, actually, we're gonna go this way, and like
Yeah,
I heard
it was
recently.
so obvious. It was so
And
stupidly
I heard
obvious.
recently that they were even like shooting. They had already begun shooting, and Rey didn't know for a fact whether or not Palpatine was going to be her grandfather or not. Like JJ was like, yeah, he's your granddaddy, and then like a couple weeks later, was like, oh, actually, we don't know yet. We're still working on that, and it's like that is the perfect example of how there wasn't a through line outline for the entire like story.
Yeah.
To build out from there.
There wasn't a story that needed to be told. No one had created a story that they needed to tell. Instead, they just said, we need to make a Star Wars movie. Let's start making up a story so we can do it. Which is, you don't get great stories that way necessarily.
Yeah, it's pretty stupid. The only thing good in that movie was when, like, in the beginning, she goes to like the Palpatine like cryo chamber, and it was so awesome and epic.
I didn't watch the third one. I kind of refused to.
I after that scene, we were dealing with kids and stuff, so we didn't finish it. But that was awesome. It was like it was like she's walking around and there's like giant like monolith like towers and fog and stuff, and it's like all lightning and stuff, and you're like, wow, this is like Dark Souls in the future. It was so sick.
Hmm.
And then there's like then they go to like Burning Man.
They did go to Burning Man.
Which is inconsequential.
And
then also Chewbacca
and
dies
Chewie
and then
dies,
doesn't die.
And then exactly.
They're like, Chewbacca, no, you're driving on the wrong boom.
Which was a very cool moment. It was like, because they were having like this force pull moment, like pulling the ship back and forth, and then she accidentally blows it up with freaking force lightning, killing Chewie. Rey kills Chewie. And it was like, oh my
Chewie,
God, that
no.
was such a big deal. And literally the very next scene, psych, Chewie's on the other ship. It was like,
Why are you doing? That's such lazy storytelling.
Yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, and it's like, how did he get there? It's like, no, they were all just wrong. Actually, all the characters, all the entire ensemble cast including Chewie's best friends. Like, it was a big mix up. there was no clever escape. They just got mixed up quick, but it was no big deal. There was a little crying, a lot of tears. Someone probably had a small heart attack. Turns out, they just gotta,
I mean, I definitely do not disagree that there are a tremendous number of problems with the story of the new Star Wars movies.
Yeah. So how do you make visual effects shots have an impact? How do you not have it just be another step to waste another couple seconds for somebody to get to the next scene?
It's easier when you have a smaller budget because then you have to pick and choose when your visual effects happen. And that is something we've always done at Corridor, or on Corridor videos at least. It's like, all right, 3 moments. That's all you get.
Yeah.
And with like little VFX shots sprinkled in, but like there's usually just like one cool moment, a second cooler moment, and then a third ultra cool moment. And where like all of the effort goes into these are your set pieces. And it's like, those are the ones that are going to take your time. And what makes those cool is that all of the shots preceding it and following it aren't that cool. So it's immediately standing out as, whoa, this is different. So I don't know. Part of it, I think, for us is that's how you set shots apart to make them look cool.
Yeah, you need dynamics and contrast. It's the same thing with a hit, or a gunshot. If your soundtrack is just and there's a gunshot, like you can't hear it, and it's like and then it sounds loud and it has impact. The same thing goes for visuals. For a brief moment, the screen needs to go dark, and then you throw a visual effects shot on the screen.
It's like a bad horror movie. It's the visual equivalent of a horror movie. You slowly fade out the footage, and there's a really bright shot. You're like, oh! But actually, that works.
Actually, they do that.
That works all the time.
Movies like Avengers and whatnot, I keep saying Avengers, but I'm mostly referring to the 2 final ones, Infinity War and Endgame. It's like, I thought those movies were very good movies.
I totally agree. I think they're awesome.
I think the story is good. Obviously, like all the acting is always good because they have amazing actors. The performances are always great. The visual effects, on the other hand, they exist in this weird dichotomy of being like literal top grade effects, but also slightly generic.
Yeah, totally. When we did our Marvel Marvel rated R video, like I realized just how cartoony, I guess, for lack of a better words, a lot of the visual effects were. Not cartoony, but like...
See, this is the thing. You're like, oh, visual effects, how do we use them? Like, it's not about visual effects. Visual effects are just tools to tell stories. It's like not about what you're seeing, but what's happening. That's all it comes down to. And in the Marvel movies, they work perfectly well. Like, they have a very flat cinematography style. It's very neutral. The visual effects, in a weird way, kind of match that. Because, once again, like, they show the outstanding events that are happening to the characters, and they treat them as such, so to speak. They're like, it's in the service of what's happening on screen. It just so happens that what's happening on screen, it has to do with these incredible characters. So I don't know. I'm a huge defender of these Marvel movies at this rate.
I thought they were good too.
Because after like hearing how like people are like crapping on superhero movies and like all these directors like, oh, it's not cinema. It's like, oh, fuck off. It's just like, it's just they're movies. You don't have to watch them. It's like every other thing people get offended by at this rate. It's just like, just don't worry about it then. It's not affecting you. It's like, but they're incredibly well executed. So
I mean, arguably, the Avengers movies are great because they have a huge like backlog of creative energy that's already been put into those stories.
Yeah, very. Actually, I think that's the big fucking point here. These movies have had decades and decades of story writing that they embraced, unlike Star Wars.
Also, unlike the
Yeah.
unlike the DC
and I think that's the
too.
big fucking jacked up part of these Star Wars movies is they're like, hey, we're gonna scrap this whole universe of that's mostly canon and like mostly cohesive, and we're gonna just like rewrite all this crap. And it's like, what? Why did you do that? Like, there was like so much thought and energy already put into story writing here. That's like fantastic.
Yeah, it's the same exact thing we saw with Game of Thrones too. But like, Avengers has like, I think they're pulling a lot of Infinity War and Endgame from 90s comics, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe it goes into, the 20s and the 2010s.
Well, the Infinity War issue.
Yeah.
Like the or series of issues, like that story.
Yeah, so they have all that to pull from, and they did. And like, Avengers is a character film at the end of the day. Like, they're all character films, and they're really well executed character films. And so arguably the creative energy has been put in to match the visual energy of those films.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a very clear comparison can be drawn to DC movies. Superman versus Batman.
Which was definitely started with a producer going, what's a cool title for a film? Batman versus Superman. Okay, who can I hire to write a story that matches the title?
Wait, didn't they already? I swear they did comics for that.
I mean, they did do comics for that, but they
But
didn't.
my point is that DC also has a huge decades-old backlog of great comics with fantastic stories to draw from. Practically the same as Marvel in terms of like what they can pull from to get great stories. But why didn't DC do that when Marvel could?
Yeah.
Dumb. You're dumb. Oh.
Yeah. So I think as somebody like on the fringes of the industry, it does make me sad when something comes out that just showcases just people working for months and months and months of their lives and millions of dollars spent just to give me the same pepperoni pizza I've eaten 100 times before. It's like, you guys did a good job. It's a nice pepperoni pizza, cooked well. Pepperonis are on it. There's cheese and sauce. Crunchy. But it would have been cool to taste of pizza flavor I've never tasted before if you're going to spend months making me a pizza. And there's a direct analogy to video games too right now too, where it's like the same thing, millions of dollars and years of effort being put into games. Well, maybe not years, but millions of dollars of effort and artistry being put into video games that are just the same exact gameplay loop.
Sure. Yeah. Although, I mean, it's pretty negative too. It's like, what's all these fucking dumb people not making me a good film? I think it shows the creative, like the scarcity of creativity, so to speak, in a way where it's like it shows, hey, it's hard to make things good. It's rare to make things good, and yes, everyone's trying to do so. Not everyone is succeeding on all fronts by any standpoint, but it's through that same system that creates that, it also does create genius stuff as well. And if everyone could just go out and make incredible films, it's either well, hold on. if everyone could just go out and make incredible films, this world would be a very different place. We would have had Tesla cars like 300 years ago, probably. Okay,
Or would the bar for excellence be different? Where it's like
the bar
you
for
could take a
excellence,
normal
it would just be even
excellence
higher.
movie-
It would just be
well,
even
that's
higher.
my point. It would
It's
be
like I watched a movie and I didn't get a telepathic message in my sleep the next night. It's like, it's like how did you,
They put all this energy into making the film. They didn't put any energy into the telepathic resonance from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but seriously, it's like, it would get even higher. It's either that or there's like maybe 2 movies released every year.
I mean, arguably there's a bunch of great filmmaking coming out. It's just, it's not coming from the process of somebody greenlighting a film because of a business decision and then forcing a creative process to happen through that with short time and then dumping money and talent onto the end of it, which is just a totally imbalanced way to approach making a film.
I agree. Well, so here's a question then. What is your favorite movie to come out in recent history? Like, say this year. What's your favorite movie so far this year?
I didn't see any movie. I saw Little Women this year.
Okay, well then
that's the only full movie I watched this year.
Let me rephrase. When was the last time you saw a movie when you're like, wow, I think that might be my favorite movie I've seen in a while? I'll start. Palm Springs came out on Hulu.
I need to check that out.
It is probably my favorite movie I've seen this year. It's basically what happens if you get the Lonely Island guys to make Groundhog Day.
Yeah. I need to check it out.
It's very good. Because I mean
I know my answer.
Okay, good. But yeah, my point is that like that movie has some visual effects in it. There are some shots that are effects, but they're not like world-class effects. There's a few times where I'm like, wow, I could have done that shot better, which kind of is crazy. This is a Hollywood movie. This is a blockbuster movie. It was supposed to be a blockbuster, then COVID killed blockbusters, but that's why it's on Hulu. It's the story is good. The characters are great. The direction is great. But really, it's just the story. I love the story so much. Now, I'm also a huge sucker for time repeating stories. Edge of Tomorrow is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Oh, yeah.
I did recently watch Groundhog Day for the first time. Hated it. Did not like that movie.
Why is that?
Well, okay. Part of it is because it's like the first time someone had ever. I shouldn't say I hated it. I didn't hate it. it didn't live up to the expectations. This is like the classic time repeat story, right? But Bill Murray's character is just a dick for too long in the movie. It's like he doesn't deserve the change of character that he gets by the end of it when he's suddenly an angel. It's like he spends way too much of the movie being kind of creepy and just being just a dick to everyone. And then but then the movie finally goes into like, he's learning his ways. He learned how to become a master pianist and all this stuff, and he's an angel now. Everyone's happy.
Yeah, you didn't like it. I get it. It's fine. I enjoyed it.
When was the last time you saw it?
Whenever.
I would agree with your assessment, but as the first of its kind, it was great.
I do agree with that.
If it was not your first time seeing that kind of movie, you're like, I would also see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I did see Groundhog Day for the first time after watching both Palm Springs and Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah. Edge of Tomorrow would ruin Groundhog Day. Groundhog's Day?
I think it's Groundhog Day.
I don't know.
But I always said Groundhog's Day for the longest time.
My movie of the year so far would be Toy Story 4.
Okay.
I watch that
Excellent
movie once a week. I watch that movie once a week. Yeah, great movie. Love it. No,
It's funny because I know you're serious.
I'm 100% serious. I literally watch that movie once a week.
It's a gorgeous movie.
Gideon loves it, and yeah, it's fantastic.
And honestly, like the concept of of what makes a toy alive, like which is just kind of almost like a C story in the movie, maybe a B story. Like the fact they went there and like had the freedom to mess around with that concept. I really like that. You know, it still has kind of the basic, you know, gotta do the right thing and be there for your friends and all that kind of stuff. But like, there's enough other fun things happening around that main storyline, which they probably just kind of have to put in there, that are like inventive. That I'm like, okay, this is pretty rad.
It's my favorite. I was about to say Star Wars movie, Toy Story movie. There we go. It's my favorite Toy Story movie.
It's the best Toy Story movie for sure.
And when I first voiced that, I think I tweeted about that whenever I first saw the movie. When did it come out? Was it last year, 2019?
I'm not sure.
I saw it after it came to Blu-ray. But I tweeted, I was like, it was my favorite Toy Story movie by far. I thought it was incredible. And everyone was like, you liked it more than Toy Story 3? How dare you? I was like, what? I wasn't that big of a fan of Toy Story 3. I thought it was okay.
Toy Story 3 is trite compared to it. It's
Trite. Interesting. Yeah, okay.
It's trite. You're like, huh. It's like a, you know?
So to me, Toy Story 2 is
like, okay, yeah. It's like, because Toy Story 3 is just the same story as the first two. It's like the same style of story, so to speak, where it's like, hey, we're toys in another wacky toy situation. Barbie dolls. You know, it's like this one, Toy Story 4, I don't know. Well, it expands the characters so much because it's a completely different setting from the first one, which is like, here's a world where like kids exist but but they're not in charge anymore. You know what I mean? It's like it's like adult situations for these toys, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
Toy Story 4
totally
is clearly made for all age groups.
Yeah.
Plus, it is by far the best looking Pixar film ever made.
Yeah.
It is
no
nuts.
contest.
It's gorgeous.
Dude, I saw it in HDR and
did
blew me
you?
away, like the carnival lights and everything.
Yeah.
I really want to do another Animators React maybe with Eric and have him break down the different animations in Toy Story, because there is a master class of different styles of animation, like the ventriloquist dummies animating one way versus like
I love those dummies.
The child's doll versus another, like versus like Spoon Man, you know, like whatever his name is, Spoonie, Sporky, like all of them, and even Woody's animated like a marionette kind of. Well, not marionette, but like a floppy rag doll.
No, they do the marionette animation on him quite a lot, where it's almost like sometimes he defies gravity.
Yeah.
In a weird, creepy way.
It's like there's an invisible hand holding him and shaking him.
Yeah.
And then of course the stunt guy voiced by Keanu Reeves. Like he's like, they're all animated so differently, and each one has such like feeling and character to the animation. Like you take it for granted. It's like, oh, it's a ventriloquist dummy. Of course it moves that way. Just like, wait a minute. Somebody had to figure out how to make it move with that character.
Yeah, like it's like the limp heads that like it's like if they're not being driven, they like go limp.
Yeah.
Like those details are incredible in that film.
Well, also it's like anytime you think of a Pixar movie, there's a very distinct aesthetic you think of. It's like that CG look of like kind of clay.
And they completely did away with it this
they
time.
haven't done that clay look in decades, really.
Yeah.
Like the first Toy Story and even the second Toy Story were kind of like the last like movies that really kind of didn't really have texture. Because I remember seeing a special about Toy Story 3, how it's like it still has that sort of fake look, but all of the individual materials and textures are all hyper real.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a weird way to balance that, where it's like
I think it's once again cinematography.
Yeah.
I think it comes a lot down to that. It's like, yes, you can have your rendering quality, you can have your visual effects. It's all about how you're shooting it and communicating it on screen. It always has to pass through this quote unquote lens, and that filter can skew your reaction to a shot or a scene or a visual effect in any direction. It's like WALL-E is, I think, the only other one that's kind of like in that same level. Their rendering quality in WALL-E isn't as high, and just because it's 12 years ago, but the way they shot it, once again, I watch WALL-E once a day right now. I always put it on 8:30 p.m. We watch WALL-E. We've been doing that every night for like the last week because he freaking loves WALL-E right now.
I do that every night with your son.
So every night I watch WALL-E with your son. But WALL-E, in all seriousness, they have that it's someone with a very good cinema background basically DP'd that.
Yeah.
Well, even for Toy Story 4, they specifically like developed these looks that replicate the look of lenses and film.
Yeah.
And they even had freaking like split diopter shots in Toy Story 4.
Did you watch the Nerdwriter video about it?
I did.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, but
It's
that was
great.
what pointed me out to that. I was like, that is true. Holy crap.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. Yeah, they went all out.
And it's like those are things you can do in camera. Split diopters where you have like a piece of glass covering half of the lens, and so that makes it so that you can have two different spots at two different depths, both be in focus with a seam down the middle that you ideally can't see. In visual effects or in CG stuff, you can do whatever you want, but they specifically emulated the split diopter look to maintain that sort of visual consistency with all the other lensed shots in the movie.
Totally.
Somebody must have seen the Lego movie and is like, oh, okay, fine, we'll make it look like that.
Yeah, basically.
Lego movie, that's right. That was a good one.
That's what set the bar.
That's a movie that had great effects and a great story.
Yeah. Lego movie is also, I think, one of those animated films that came out. It's like, guys, you can make your CG look photoreal. People will still enjoy it as a cartoon. And Pixar's like, okay, fine. I'll check the global illumination box finally.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. They've had radiosity and all that stuff in there forever.
But yeah, that just goes back to what I was saying. Is like, if you actually like look close at every individual texture or material in even Toy Story 3 or whatever other movies came out around that same time, it's like that texture is how that texture actually looks like in real life. But the combination of all of the textures that make up the final scene still give you that Pixar aesthetic that doesn't look photoreal. It's just kind of weird how that happens.
I think it's because the lighting itself is detached from realism. Not that they aren't rendering the lights individually with realistic parameters, but there's unrealistic lighting in the scene.
Yes.
Okay.
I
A character will be at one light level. There'll be light shining on somebody that aren't visible.
Yeah.
It's,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same thing that happened with the dinosaurs in Jurassic World, where it's just like, there are light sources on these dinosaurs that are not hitting anything else in the scene but the dinosaur.
That Velociraptor blends in too much with the background. Can you add a bit of an edge light on him? There isn't a light in the scene to motivate that. It doesn't matter. Do it, slave. Do it, slave.
Yeah.
I got another script that turned out in 1 week for you guys to work on.
Man, Jurassic World was such a disappointment to me. That was one where I was like excited for it and literally walked out being like, that wasn't a good movie. And it was a disappointment to me to come to terms with that thought.
Yeah. This is my hope that people will spend more time making films because they have a great idea for a film as opposed to making films because they think this idea will make money and then they figure out an idea that fits the mold after the fact.
Yeah, and that just comes down to the industry, right? It's like, that's why we're seeing fewer and fewer films get made at smaller budgets of, 5 to 50 million. Because the money is all in the blockbusters because people are going to see movies or less frequently.
Do you guys think blockbusters are going to survive COVID?
I think they'll come back. I think we'll see a surge once people feel safe going back to theaters. I think the whole world, or the whole country at the very least, will just embrace it.
Every cinema right now, every company is just holding on, waiting for them to be the ones to finally last to the end and be the ones.
I mean, it's like what I've always said. It's like the moment I can safely and morally attend a party, I'm going to a party. I don't care where that party is. I'm attending it. And I have a feeling most people, dude, I love sewer parties. Give me some pizza and Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Give me some mutant juice. Yeah.
But like, I think people, having been denied movie theaters for so long, will come back. It'll be a surge, and then it'll go back to the way it was beforehand.
As long as yeah.
And then they'll slowly die.
And then they'll slowly die because the
continue
industry
slowly
embraced
dying.
video on demand through this whole time period.
It was like, you know what's gonna be cool? Paying $30 for Mulan.
Mulan.
Got Mulan and Jimmy.
Yeah.
No, I support Jimmy and all his endeavors, but I'm just saying it's kind of silly to pay $30 for a movie to see on the internet.
I'll wait until December. I don't need to see.
I mean, I don't know if Tenet came out and it was like, hey, it's $30. I'd be like,
if it was really good.
Okay, you're right. I'd pay $30
I'd
if
pay
I could
$30
watch
to
that at
see
my house.
Tenet.
Yeah, okay, you're right.
I probably wouldn't. I'd
That's
probably wait
the-
for it to come out.
It's just
Yeah.
not my thing. We'll see. Maybe my son will like it, and I'll be forced to watch it every night.
I watch Tenet every night.
Oh no, I meant Mulan. Mulan.
Daddy, put on
Mulan.
Put on Dunkirk again. Daddy, show me the scene where the pilot crashes one more time. Daddy, can you?
Dunkirk was a movie I was also slightly disappointed in. Did you guys see that one? I
liked
enjoyed
it.
it. I loved what it did with the variable time frames, but like I kind of walked out of that movie kind of just feeling.
It's a
cool.
movie that I don't have any desire to watch a second
That was
time.
it. That's exactly it. I enjoyed watching it. I think I liked the movie. I'm probably never gonna watch it again.
Sure, but would you watch Gravity again?
Yeah,
Probably.
Okay.
I've watched
I've
the
watched
shots
Gravity
from
twice.
Gravity.
Okay, you've watched it. Yeah. Yeah, because like, they're
I've-
kind of in the same vein where they're like survival stories where like you watch them, you're like, woo, that was intense. And you're like, it's like you don't go like, you want to watch that again? It's like, it's like, no, I'm good. It was intense. Like I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and it was at times actually kind of uncomfortable. It
Dude,
was
that's
so
the
effective.
movie Everest. Did you guys ever see Everest? One of the most tense movies I've ever seen. It's about these guys trying to climb Everest and half of them die, but like,
Rip.
it's a real story. But it was like,
Rip.
I was so soaking wet from sweating through that movie.
From peeing my pants. All right.
Cool. Well,
Good movies.
that's our musings on the state of the industry and what it takes to make a visual effects shot be good. Turns out it takes a good movie.
better movie if you think you can complain about others?
I'll keep working on it.
Okay,
I'm
sounds
getting
good.
better little by little.
I mean, that is a very common and prevalent criticism. Is like,
That is the ultimate criticism. It's like, how dare you criticize movies if you can't do better yourself?
Well, no, seriously. Like, I think, as far as like somebody who trying to understand storytelling through film, I think I'm just barely starting to get there.
Just barely.
No, seriously. Like, I feel like with Tactical 3 loads
start-
and
yeah.
You Monster and like kind of just going back to like Memon, like I didn't write that, but like, through like the past 2 years or so, I feel like myself and honestly all of us as a group, like we're starting to understand story on film a little bit better.
and this is you saying that after 15 years of doing it.
Yes. There's a lot of things I did not understand until recently. And honestly, it's like going back and doing the simple stories and just doing them well and functional and like making sure like, do you have suspension of disbelief? Does anything distract you from the story? Does it flow and is it fun? And do you follow the emotional arcs? Yes? Cool. Then it's fine if it's the most basic story in the world. I'm going to start with that and then we'll work from there,
But if you're James Cameron, you're banned from doing that.
Oh, I mean, come on, James Cameron, step it up a little bit.
I'm joking. I'm just playing around. Just playing around.
All I can say is I hope Avatar 2 involves an avatar going back in time to protect a young human child
How about this?
while
How about
another
this?
alien hunts him down.
That's a good idea. Hold that thought. We can put your theory and your story to the test. Let's do this. I want you to help me beat James Cameron to Avatar 2 with a better story.
All right, let's do it.
Okay?
Oh boy.
We're going to do it.
Oh boy.
This is an idea we've had for the Crew channel, and it seems like this podcast is a great kicking off point
Oh
to
boy.
do it.
Speaking
Don't
of-
forget those Avatar people, the Na'vi, are like 10 feet tall. So if you're motion capping that,
I'm gonna retcon that.
We'll figure that out. We might still fall back on having an AI write the script, but we'll edit it.
I like that idea a lot. Because then any blame you put on the AI, not you.
No, what if you actually edit an AI script and then like go like, no, like we're actually trying to make it better. Like, how do we actually really try and make this good? Anyways, whatever. I'm done.
Dude, what if the AI script is good? How is that gonna shake us to the core?
Well,
Yeah. Alrighty. Cool. Well, everybody, thank you for listening to the podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next one.
bye bye.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
And cut.